the technology. Now let's make sure we understand. By people here, we don't mean humans just went out and started, killing the birds and the trees and all of that. No, no, no. What we mean is technology used by humans in unthinking ways, right? That led to the environmental destruction. Now, obviously, later in the text, Silent Spring, she's going to make a very powerful argument about the different ways that these pesticides have done what they have done. And it was really hard to contest what she had to say about those pesticides. The big argument became, well, should we use less of them or none of them? That became one of the huge arguments of its day, and of course today still remains kind of one of the big arguments, right? Notice she finishes now, and this is the second part of the text at level 2. With the idea that the town actually doesn't exist, i.e. a fable. But it might, and then she goes on to say that every one of the things that she's described actually happened somewhere, right? A grim specter, an evil ghost, has, and then she uses the verb again, crept upon us. I want to focus on this word crept for just a moment. If we're going to be good readers and good writers, we pay attention to our verbs. What is the verb crept? If, for example, I were to ask you to creep, what would that be? Well, you might say I'd walk. No, no, no. Not really. Some of you would say, well, I'm kind of crawling when I'm creeping. Well, then what's this word creep? Notice it has, of course, that other meaning. Don't be a creep means don't be a bad guy. So the use of the word crept has an interesting double intonation. Of course, crept here, for our notes, most importantly, it suggests slowly. Right? It's that famous word picture about how do you boil a frog? You put the frog in cold water and then set the pan on the stove and then turn up the water slowly. Because if you put the hot boiling water on the stove and throw the frog in, immediately the frog jumps out. But if you put the frog in the water, in cold water, and then slowly start to heat up the water, that frog's going to get nice and comfortable and just stay there, i.e. crept. In other words, what's the point that she's making with this word choice? Simply this, and we're back to our theme again at 2a. She's making the observation that we destroyed our environment slowly, without realizing it. We allowed it to happen in our ignorance, but once it happened, we begin to kind of look around and go, oh, wait, things have got to be silent in the spring. We got to do something. She seems to suggest as well that this could easily become a stark reality. Notice that we all shall know. In other words, we're all in this together. We all live on this planet together. One other comment, notice that she does say America and then elsewhere in the world. And she was a great voice for suggesting, while in America we were obviously creating all kinds of interesting technological issues, challenges for ourselves, clearly it's happening in other parts of the world as well. Well, let's jump to 2a now and get into themes messages. Obviously, the most important theme here is we've got to take care of the very planet we live on. Our environment matters to us. And the ways in which we do that have to be well thought out. They have to be, can we use this word, intentional. The intentionality matters. We can't just do things without thinking about them and then later come to realize, uh-oh. Number 2, this word crept tells us that these kinds of considerations happen over time. They slowly happen. And because of that, number 3, and an important one that will sound very much like the Arthur C. Clarke text as well, there has to be some consideration for the future. Long after you're dead and gone, there will be others that live on this planet, we hope. What will they inherit in terms of the environment? Rachel Carson says, if we don't take care of stuff now, we're going to have these issues coming down the line. Of course, in 2b, we've already pointed out. Notice the brilliant word choice. Notice the construction and the use of a little fable. There once was this, but now there's this. Well, technically now there isn't this. I was just kind of making that up, but I'm suggesting that this could happen in the future. Notice the power of a story like that. As opposed to her simply saying, hey, pesticides are really bad and we shouldn't use them. Notice how she begins. Let me tell you a story about once when birds sang and then they didn't. Which, of course, makes any reader of this text start to look. Let's write this down. This is brilliant. Makes any reader of this text start to look at the potentiality of some of these things happening. Right? So, for example, once a stream no longer can be fished because all the fish in it are dead because pesticides got into the water, When that story becomes public news in the media, then immediately, what do you think about? You're back to this fable again, aren't you? See, this is the genius of this fable, right? It's a little story that kind of sticks in your mind. It's a little story about a town where birds once sang and then they didn't sing. And the reason was simple. It was because of technology that destroyed the life. And of course, if some life can be destroyed, this is Rachel Carson's point, all life can be destroyed. Let's write that down. If some life can be destroyed by technology, by extension, if again the manipulation of the technology is not intentional, all life can be destroyed. Ergo, the prophet. Let's do it now. Let's jump to 3a. And this notion of how we relate this to other texts. I mentioned in the beginning of our lecture Tiresias and Cassandra. Think about how those two work. Very much Rachel Carson is in that tradition. She understood that she would say things that would upset. Why upset? Well, we don't like to be told what to do. We obviously recognize there's some environmental and economic challenges if we listen to what she has to say. And so a lot of people would prefer to just say to Rachel Carson, you don't know what you're talking about. Of course, all Rachel Carson has to do is point into the media and say, really? Is there a town where water was so bad that when children drank it, they started to get sick and die? Are there towns at all that you are familiar with where, for example, the land couldn't grow anything anymore because of the nasty technologies that have been put into the land? Are there examples at all on the planet of deforestation and the limiting of trees, which then doesn't allow for life to happen? And the minute that you say, well, yeah, actually that has happened. The minute you say that, Rachel Carson then becomes the Cassandra of mythology. You can either believe her or not believe her, but saying that she is not true, Cassandra, did not change the fact that Troy fell. Do you understand why you can equate Carson with Cassandra so easily, right? And of course, many readers of this text have pointed out that Carson is the modern Cassandra. The question is, of course, whether you believe her or not. Do you push that horse? Of course, we call it the Trojan Horse for a reason out of mythology, right? Be aware of Greeks bearing gifts is the line from the Aeneid. The idea is, in other words, you got to be careful. Technology, of course, can be a valuable asset, but it can also be dangerous. One other text that will come to mind. You're a freshman, but in your senior year, you'll study a text called Frankenstein by the great Mary Shelley. Frankenstein is a text that will play the same game, the question about technology. I've given elsewhere on LearnStrong.net lectures on Frankenstein if you want to go and get a kind of a precursor of that idea. For you, go ahead and jot down, what is for you your favorite text that simply suggests, it may be a song, maybe a movie, maybe a video, that suggests we got to take care of our planet, we got to take care of our environment, because it's the air we breathe, it's the water that we drink, right? And the other interesting question, of course, is a 3B question. What responsibility do you, do I, do any of us have to take care of a world that is 4 or 5 generations into the future, right? Okay. I mean, what responsibility do we have for that kind of thing? The last time I checked, you ain't met nobody that's 200 years old, which means your lifespan is very short. But the planet, we hope, will continue to go on long after you've lived and died. What responsibility do we have for taking care of our planet and our environment? Or do we? Or should we just say, you know, let's not even worry about that. Let's just enjoy life today. Because, dude, I'm here today. I have no responsibility for the future. Rachel Carson will say, well, you know, here's the thing. The people of the last generation had to make some decisions so that you could have opportunities. Will you have to make some decisions, and how will you make those decisions? Of course, the political debate rages on. Again, I will leave that one to you. I'm happy that I've been able to share the great Rachel Carson, and I hope that you'll go and find Silent Spring and read it in its entirety on your own. Thank you.